Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shelf Dive, the YouTube channel where we discuss everything that goes on a shelf. Now, today, I wanted to start off this channel with a really interesting topic. Today is the 10th anniversary of James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy film. And I wanted to talk about it, look back on it. A lot has changed since that movie came out. The comic book movie landscape is far different than it was 10 years ago. I wanted to talk about sort of how it was received at the time, early reactions to not just the movie, but before the movie came out. I remember a lot of wild reactions, sort of how that movie has stood up the test of time compared to other MCU projects and other Marvel movies or any other comic book movies or blockbusters in general. A bit of a legacy it's had, both on sort of movies, comic book movies as a whole, and careers and everything, and just celebrate it because I think it is a great movie and it's worth talking about. And it's a movie I think of every year. I think of, holy crap, it's August. It's August 1st. Guardians of the Galaxy came out 6, 7, 8 years ago. And I have a lot of memories of when it came out. So let's get into it. The Guardians of the Galaxy, I didn't have a whole lot of modern comic experience with them at the time. I knew who they were. Their 2007 run, I remember reading, and it was really interesting, but it was also, it was very explosive, and I guess that's a good word to describe the art style. Um, but to a lot of non-comic readers and a lot of people who weren't familiar with them, hearing in 2014, Marvel Studios' next film is the one about the talking tree and the raccoon. I mean, I get it. Like, first reactions were from a general audience who didn't read comics. That's a very valid response. And then on the side of film fans, who only really knew James Gunn, they were like, well, James Gunn is doing a Marvel movie? Which one? The one about the tree and the raccoon? Like, okay. Like, James Gunn had a very wild career up until that point, with his trauma background, and he did Super, Slither, that movie. And I'm a big horror fan, and I really appreciate his contributions to the genre. I think it's very inspiring. Hopefully someday he'll go back to that. We'll get into that later. But so from the film perspective, there was also a bit of confusion and sort of hesitancy. Another thing is, even I was 11, about to be 12 at the time, and I saw the trailer, and I didn't even think the trailer was very good. It didn't strike me as funny. It's not a very iconic trailer. I don't think it highlights the movie very well in terms of its unique humor and sci-fi flair. It just had a very generic feel to it. I wasn't too thrilled after seeing that trailer. So even me, who I guess appreciated film and comic books at the time, I wasn't too interested in it. Yeah, this movie, I want to talk about how this movie sort of where it stood in the MCU. I mean, it came out at a big time. I mean, Avengers was one of the biggest movies ever, and Guardians came out in August, and I thought that was a very interesting move. Looking back now, I mean, this summer, this week, Deadpool and Wolverine came out and smashed records. So this weekend is obviously like a big deal, and I can understand where success can come from. But back then, Marvel hadn't really branched out from their usual dates necessarily. So it was a gamble, but I think it was sort of to let everyone know that it was a different kind of movie. It was a different sort of attempt. And it was appreciated, I think. And once the movie, of course, as I mentioned before, it had mixed early reactions to the promotional stuff, but once the movie hit, I think people really, really got into it. And I think getting someone like James Gunn, who of course uses a lot of humor but also can embrace the ridiculousness of such subject matter in a light way but also an emotional way, really helped. And I think few other filmmakers could do what he did with that sort of understanding. And also someone who can sort of take comics seriously, because I think there's a fine line between comic book silliness and emotional weight, and it's not always understood. But James Gunn has always understood it, as he proved with his other projects too, like The Suicide Squad. The film, of course, had a very different sense of humor than other MCU movies, which I think people really liked. And of course, it had the natural quality of MCU movies that people were also expecting at the time because, I mean, MCU was at a pretty big height. Now, the film took a lot of liberty, but I don't necessarily think that was a bad thing because I think James Gunn understood how filmmaking would naturally change this story and how much storytelling can you really pack into a 2 hour film. So I won't say I don't judge him for that. I think it was smart to pick and choose what to change for the sake of storytelling because I think this is definitely an issue. And I think the X-Men films had this issue. There's just too much to adapt in that short amount of time. So reflecting on that, and James Gunn is a very good storyteller, so I think he's able to make a good bridge between the two, even if some of it's pretty original, like Drax's origin and changing sort of his essence. But I don't think they missed the mark with him at all. Let's talk about legacy and the lasting impact of this. I would argue it's probably the best trilogy in the MCU. Guardians 1, Guardians 2, Guardians 3. Guardians 3 came out last year, and it was sort of like the long needed spark of rejuvenation that the MCU needed. And I don't think any other filmmaker could pull that off, especially since I would argue James Gunn is the most distinct and probably has the most creative freedom in terms of like having directorial style in the MCU. I feel like a lot of directors don't really get that chance as much when they're making films for Marvel, and I appreciate that they let James Gunn actually be a director. It's very stylized, lots of him in that movie. I can't say that about a lot of other Marvel films. I think it also set up a big career for him. Now he's over at DC. Of course, there was the whole firing controversy. I'm not going to get into that, but I think without this movie, he wouldn't have gone down the path of comic book films that he has, and now he's doing Superman, which I'm very excited for. I'm very excited for a fresh, vibrant, sort of retro take on Superman that he's going to bring us. I really appreciate his sort of love for more traditional comic book storytelling. And it's kind of interesting. The Guardians, James Gunn's like new take on the Guardians has sort of influenced a lot of other stuff. Like their appearances in the comics now are much more inspired by the film. And the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, another thing that is very much inspired by the film. It's sort of like a perfect bridge. If you want a story that's like half comics, but also at like the cool action flair and the music of the films, like the video game is the way to go. It's a really good union of the two really iconic ways of telling this story. Another thing that got me really excited for this movie is a bit personal. I spent a lot of time in the hospital as a kid, and I remember Chris Pratt came to visit the hospital and screened the movie, and so that was a very big memory. I don't know if you've seen this picture before, but yep, that's me. That was me 10 years ago. Anyway, so that was I have a personal connection to this movie, so anything I say in this video is probably a little biased. So thank you very much for listening to this video about the film and its impact. I really wanted to go into rather what the movie is, rather more of what it did to, the following comic book community, superhero cinema, can you even use that term, cinema, superhero? Superhero movie fandom, I guess is a better term. And, what it might ignite in the future. Could there be more? I have to imagine Chris Pratt will be back as Star-Lord, and sort of the stylistic influence it's going to have on the new DC universe. And I hope you liked this video. Thank you for watching. This is my channel. This is my first video. I'm hoping to make a lot more videos like this, sort of reflecting on more comic book stuff. I'm going to talk about toys, going to talk about other movies, all sorts of stuff. This is what I love to do. This is what I love to talk about. So I'm hoping to make a name for myself. So thank you very much. See you in the next video.